Restream is trying to upgrade.
Has a super big.
Three,
Go!
2, 1, go!
Warming up.
Thunderbirds are go.
Warming up and manually resharing links. If you are there, do comment so we know you are there. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, the title might be weird.
Okay, feed seems to be running. Resharing on our respective groups and stuff. The YouTube feed is running as well. Most flattering lighting today.
Oh, ano?
I mean, it looks really dark here compared to that.
But your brightness is also lowered because you do that so it won't bounce on your glasses.
Right. It's here. If I bring this up, then it looks so noble. See?
So what do you want to do?
I don't know. So strange. But this looks really good. Maybe it's just my monitor color settings.
That is a possible factor.
My monitor settings are on Death Stranding mode, so
It's used to showing a desolate wasteland.
they had like intense blacks and stuff. Ay ay ay. So we'll be starting in a few minutes.
No, I didn't really. Okay, it's tweeted.
I've reshared the link as well. We'll officially start in a few minutes. This week has just been a week. Quite a week.
Oh, what happy helmets. To
So while waiting for our official start, there's been chatter of supposedly a new Doctor Who.
Oh, like changing the Doctor's incarnation and everything? Oh, I don't know.
Not someone I know, but seems to be.
It's a guy again?
Yeah.
Of course they're going to bring it back to a guy. If they're going to change it, they're going to bring it back to a guy.
But I don't think he's necessarily cisgendered. So
Moderate compromise.
it could be a. I don't know. I just hope the showrunner is different.
Is it? It'll only be interesting if it's like someone who's performed in Drag Race UK. It's bim bam boony. That would make for an interesting thing.
And then what else? We're not done yet, but we've been watching Dynasty Warriors.
Oh my god! I can't believe we have 12 minutes left, and you know they have to defeat Lubu, unless they're so confident there's a second movie, because we've only from in Dynasty Warriors speak we're still finishing a second stage.
Yeah. I think the movie only works if you love the game.
Yeah, it definitely has that vibe.
You sort of just enjoy it as illogically fun as it might be.
Yeah. It's not Oscar worthy. It's not. The plot is like halfway
But at the same time, I guess it's not bothering to take itself seriously. So that's why it works. Um, yeah. And then down to 1 minute. I guess we'll start in a minute.
Yep.
Um, the haze is still out there. And of course, alarms are all over down south.
I only love the limited irony that first Phil Vox was like super like, no, it's not volcanic haze in Manila. It's just the result of human activity. And then, I mean, props for them for eventually coming around and not just doubling down and saying, no, 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 it's pollution. And they did seem very defensive with this whole, as scientists, we can change our mind with new evidence, blah, 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 blah. But okay,
But
I'll
it
go with
just
that.
gives you more hope for the scientific community than you
That's
would
true.
feel for other areas of our current status in the country.
Administration, say administration, administration.
But let's talk about something else. And part of that is making sure Rocky notices I'm buying him time to
Shut up. Shut up.
Yummy!
Yummy.
Shut up.
I didn't get it. Shut up. I thought you were trying to make a video game reference, which would have been funnier. Instead, it's just Toby. Okay, so let's do this.
Oh yeah! Really right.
This is Toby.
And this is Rocky.
And if it's your first time here, welcome to Baduy Pride, a little space on the internet where we talk about anything we want.
This is completely unscripted and not entirely accurate, but at least it's honest. Join us as we talk about everything and anything random live.
And if it's not your first time here, thank you so much for joining us again. So, how do we intro this topic?
Well, even though I feel like we're mostly talking to ourselves, so we're gonna talk about the 4-day work week idea, this was a requested topic by Mitch, if
Mhm.
I'm not mistaken. Oh no, I forgot to double check who requested it. But I guess it's timely enough because I also read that article that Kickstarter has announced that in 2022 they are going to join a
Hey,
pilot
Carlo.
program to go with the 4-day work week with and that it just gets headlines because one, it's a prominent company. Two, Kickstarter got a lot of flack for not treating their employees well some time
Mhm.
back. So this is a bit of a change, and then I guess it'd be interesting to talk about it.
So,
And hello, Carlo.
what would constitute a 4-day week?
So that's a good question because
It's a definition question.
yes, it is. So, in the truest sense of the term, a 4-day work week would mean, on the one hand, only requiring your employees to report 4 days a week, and
Mhm.
if possible, also limiting your operational hours so that you only work 4 days a week. Because we want to differentiate this from something that, at least in local labor terms, is what's called compressed hours.
Mhm.
So you can argue, if as long as you file the right paperwork with Dole, I hate it when you say Dole, but I guess it's better than Dole, but with the Department of Labor,
With the not pineapple company.
with the Not Pineapple Company, you can have an employee report on a 4 by 11 basis. When we say they come in 4 days a week and they have 9-hour shifts, they just have a 1 hour lunch, and then instead of the standard two 15-minute breaks, I think they get a third 15-minute break, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you can't just make people follow the schedule. You have to file permits with Dole before that happens.
So
So
it's 9 hours instead of 8.
what?
Instead of an 8-hour day,
An 8-hour productive.
they have a 9-hour day 4 times a week. Did you
Actually,
get it
halos
right?
10 because it's like 11 hours minus the
11. Okay.
It's 11 minus
I thought
the
I
1
heard
hour
9 for
paid.
some reason.
So it sort of crams the same amount of work into a shorter amount of time, which is also not like super ideal.
Hey,
And then,
Mitch.
so in the truest sense of the term, a 4-day work week is really talking about reducing the overall number of hours
Mhm.
that an employee is required to render in a week, and resulting in a longer weekend and more time off. And I did a lot of cramming research before this, like what's the latest on this converse? Because this topic goes on and off. There are books already about
Mhm.
it. And then a lot of people keep citing this study that was done in New Zealand about like the possible benefits of a 4-day work week in terms of course, better morale and then better employee satisfaction, but arguably better productivity from people.
Mhm.
And I kind of get that in the sense that if you're working steadily, you kind of get your groove and you get your momentum, and
Mhm.
then you might be able to, perform better as opposed to when it's, once your day ends, you kind of go down the downward slope, and it's only until you start work the next day
Mhm.
that you have to start up again. And so you're kind of avoiding that startup period and just replacing it with more productive time. So it's not entirely without merits.
Mhm.
Um, it's trickier, I guess, when because for companies that can actually just be open 4 days a week, that is kind of amazing because you set a very strong expectation with your clients that
Mhm.
uh, like every Friday of every week you can't talk to us, which is bold because if the clients you are supporting are not on a 4-day work week, then that's a challenge. And we
Yes.
already see quirks like this with like BPO companies when you work with foreign counterparts, and then like um, you'll never have a meeting with the client on a Monday morning, for
Mhm.
example, if they're in the US, because that's Sunday night for them. But at the same time, they're unable to set meetings with you on Friday because that's practically Saturday. So I mean, like it's that weird like balancing act. Okay. What about so given that, Toby, and you can try to skim over some other articles also while we
Mhm.
talk about it. But how does that sound to you? Can you imagine your office only be open 4 days a week?
I personally think it does really work when you are working with foreign clients because there is already that feeling that um, we always have meetings with clients starting Tuesdays. Um, and then they kind of know that they can't reach us on their Fridays because it's our Saturday. So we really cram everything between Tuesday and Thursday. And within those days, we do still accomplish a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Within a typical day, you do notice that people don't really work um, every single hour, and
Yeah.
that's part of human nature.
Mm-hmm.
There is the need to recover, to refocus, and um, I feel it would be good if we did embrace a 4-day week approach, but I feel that it's not something you can just implement. I feel it's something that you need to train people to see because a majority of those I've seen working, at least new workers, um, they still haven't trained themselves to find the initiative to work. And there's still more, unless it's assigned to me, I won't be doing it. And unless the deadline is there, I'm not worried.
Yeah. So Mitch asked, can you do a rotational 4-day work week? So we see this a lot in call centers.
Mhm.
So because and I will segue into an unrelated but nerdy subject of workforce management, which is such a weird term to make your people sound like machines. But
Mhm.
so from a call center perspective, you sort of have forecasts of like when the calls are gonna come in, and it sort of is a bell curve,
Mhm.
but it doesn't follow a certain way. So it would benefit to have more people. You naturally want to have most of your staff on online, ready to take calls
Mhm.
when most of the calls are gonna come in versus not, and just scheduling people on standard 9-hour shifts isn't as optimal. So call centers have been regularly utilizing 4 by 11s
Mhm.
to do that. And then it kind of rotates. So a call center many times just open 24/7, and then they use these longer shifts to pad more time,
Mhm.
and then it goes on a rotation. Um, but I guess was this the challenges? This is under the local the Philippine Labor Code definition for compressed work hours. So these are 11-hour shifts, and they're very tiring. So it's not a true 4-day work week, or at least it's the 4-day work week I don't argue in favor of, because an 11-hour day
Means it's still 5 days, just squeezed into
just
four.
squeezed into 4. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, Carla says not everyone can function in a 4-day work week, just like how not everyone can work from home. That is true. And not all industries support it. So, I mean, like, there are a lot of industries that, especially service, retail, that we expect them to be open, 7 days a week. And if you rotated schedules, then to be 4 days, 4 days, it can be tricky from a staffing perspective. And
Mhm.
and maybe not every restaurant can kind of manage that struggle. I mean, I think this is definitely like more of a potentially white collar type situation where maybe a lot of thinky jobs, a lot of back office type work might be able to pull off a 4-day work
Mhm.
week, but I don't know. Um, Anecdotally, a lot of people always bring up the 4-day work week because the notion of working 5 days a week, 9 hours a day, is just like something that there was no science behind it.
Mhm.
It was just like an arbitrary number that was popularized like in the baby boomer period, and then it just became codified into
The
this
norm.
is how we're gonna work. So and that's why it's one of those like in the sense that it's hard to argue for or against it
Mhm.
because you can always say there's not enough research that's been done into
Mhm.
the true effects, long-term effects of a 4-day work week. But at the same time, nobody has done a serious study of the current work setup and whether working 5 days a week is really better.
And I guess the closest thing we would have are people who are working more than 11 hours a day, but still work every day. So
Mm.
um, you have people driving trucks, you have people in the service industry, you have security guards, you have the
Yeah.
people who work, come in at work like 6 a.m. but then end their day at like 8 p.m. and they do it every day. So it's still not a good comparison in the sense of, well, they're not getting an extra day off, so it doesn't really work.
Yeah. It's like even when you're working 5 days a week, but if you work night shift, then you never really feel like you're getting your full weekend
Mhm.
because your 2 days off are split across a period. So you'll get one full calendar day off and then half of one day and half
Mm-mm.
of another day. So it always feels like you don't really have a lot of off time. And I
Yeah.
say this as someone who spent more than 12 years on night shift. It doesn't seem as fun, but there are some people that embrace condensed work weeks
Hmm.
and that sort of longer hours but fewer days situation because it does give them more free time. And I think on the call center side, it's the only way to feel like you're getting a true weekend.
And,
Okay.
and I really feel it also depends on the work.
Mm.
So, like, if you're doing work wherein there's a lot of valid downtime, for example, you're doing videography or you're doing post production effects and the like. So there's like hours spent where it's just rendering.
Mm.
So then you're basically actively working for a certain number of hours, and then there's a certain number of hours you're literally just waiting. Then maybe that sort of a schedule would work because then you could schedule those rendering hours to fill in certain hours and you're resting a bit rather than stretching it across days and you're not actually able to do full renders. Um, but of course, there is that mindset that, if you don't squeeze everything you can from a worker, you're not being a good businessman, which is very annoying.
Okay, so Jay's like shares that he doesn't think it's very feasible for corporate jobs
Agree.
because he feels that maybe for professionals, freelancers, and MSMEs, it'd be easier to implement. So it might be funny to discover that there are some prominent companies that have done 4-day work weeks.
Mhm.
So the one that always gets cited is a place called Perpetual Guardian. So that's the one in New Zealand that did the pilot, and
Yeah.
they claim that they had a 20% rise in productivity. And there was like 220
Okay,
people,
just to clarify, this is the actual 4 day work week and not the
not the
compressed.
compressed
Okay.
hours. Yeah, yeah.
Because if it was the actual 4 day work week, I'd be happy with that because you are respectedly being given. That's the 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, and 8 hours to do whatever else you need to do.
So Shake Shack, apparently in the US, allowed managers to work 40 hours across 4 days instead of five. So this is condensed.
Yeah, that's good then.
This is condensed. And then
But then
Microsoft,
again,
yeah.
Shake Shack. So it's again one of those. There are lull times where
And notice it was only the managers.
yeah. So there are certain hours there aren't anyone about, so you don't really need to do much. Yeah.
Microsoft Japan, I read this one too. So they, in August of 2019, I think, so they had 2,300 employees. They were given 5 consecutive Fridays off. So they simulated a 4-day week. So this one, they didn't offset the hours. They just made those Fridays off days. And supposedly productivity jumped 40%, meetings were more efficient, and workers were also happier. So that's interesting. Um, Business management consultancy Think Productive. They were claimed to be early adopters since 2011. They offer the staff the choice to where they can work a traditional Monday to Friday or slightly longer 8 hours and 50-minute
So it's
days
condensed
through.
as well.
They will condense also, including one Friday a month to ensure fairness. Okay.
But they wanted basically workers to choose what worked better for them.
Yeah, which is an interesting angle because I'll admit, like, there's always the question of your operations window versus your work schedules, and being able to give more flexibility there helps. Like for us, like we're a smaller company, and then originally we only had one shift, which was 10 to 7. But then, like, more and more people wanted to be able to come in earlier, so then we quote unquote changed the hours of operation for the office. So the office is open from 9 to 7, but you can come in on any contiguous 9-hour shift. So it can be 9 to 6, 9:30 to 6:30, 10 to 7. So that kind of helped, and people had that limited option of choice.
Yeah, we tried something like that before, and um, at the original attempt, it was working interestingly because everyone was working at a more comfortable hour. But then that's when you get individual work habits kicking in.
Mm.
Because when you do something like that, you then have to tackle the fact that the common hours become smaller.
Yes.
So, like, let's say the devs work starting 4 p.m., whereas most of us are starting to work at 9 a.m. Then you only now have that 4 to 6 window for any meetings, any catch up, and all this and that. And while there were some teams that were, they're diligent, they would have everything pre-prepared. So when you come in, you see the update notes and all that. You of course had those who weren't.
Yeah, and
And-
notice that's why we only did a 1 hour
Mhm.
a 1 hour wiggle, because we were worried for the same thing, that we still need a lot of overlap time with the team, and the different project teams still need to work together. So Mitch chimes in about efficient meetings, and then I think that really, I wonder if, like in Microsoft Japan's example, did the 4-day work week not really benefit productivity in itself, but the change in mindset made them change the way they were handling other things.
Mhm.
So, like, making meetings more efficient, that is something you can do regardless of the work week, but it's because they had less time to work with that they were more motivated
Yeah,
to
that's
do
true.
that. I read a book sometime back about, like, I forgot what it was called, but basically it was a book about meetings, and then they argue that no meeting should be longer than 30 minutes,
Mhm.
because if you're just going to look at the report together, that's an email.
Mhm.
Like, you should be having meetings to make decisions.
But the fact is, not everyone is at the same level,
Yeah.
and that ranges from job attitude to initiative to basic knowledge, to even comprehension skills, and I mean that with all the love,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we are from different fields. So an email that might condensed and it's easy to read, someone might read it and in 15 minutes get it. Another person might look at it and not quite understand certain things.
Well, I think the
And-
argument is that was this. The point was, like, for if your meeting is just to look at the report together,
Mhm.
then that really shouldn't. It was just the point the book was trying to make is that people should be more responsible and read the report on their own time,
Mhm.
because instead meetings are being done to, like, hold everybody accountable. Like,
Yeah,
we assume you're not going to look at the report, so
Yeah.
this is the time we're going to look at the report together.
yeah,
And
I
it
get that.
and I get it. It's like it's a solution to a problem that may or may not be there.
It's dealing with the problem with a stopgap solution rather
Yes.
than dealing dealing with the symptoms of a problem
Yes, and
rather
not
than dealing
the
with the problem itself.
not yeah. That's it. Not root causing it. So
Mhm.
and so that's what I wonder about, like the way the Microsoft Japan findings were described. So
But at the same time, that's Japan.
that is also
And
Japan.
we cannot ignore how the work mindset for Japan is very different. There's a certain level of, you know, to keep working is seen as something impressive and not as something questionable.
Also to the point of total burnout.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a pro and con type situation. Oops.
Now, other than the idea of having compressed time, to actually have a 4 day work week um, feels feels impossible to comprehend in this local scenario, only because a majority of the time in the Philippines, we just don't have enough people. The
Mm.
workforce of a company is rarely really enough. And that is why almost everyone in every company is doing more than one role.
There is
In
that.
a more ideal situation with a bigger workforce, you having to take sick leave doesn't feel bad because you know others are there to take the load. But instead, we're in a country we're in. You feel like you still have to make calls even while you're in the hospital because you're the only one who can handle it, or other people are relying on you to help them in other ways. So to further compress it to 4 days a week is kind of unthinkable for me to happen ideally, despite me wanting that to happen.
Yeah, and I think then there are a lot of whether people or companies that fall into that trap where, like, when you go on vacation, if I guess if you're the type of person where you go on vacation but you still check your work email because you know that there are certain things you're gonna have to do, um, and then like a lot of my family is the same way, and I'm not just saying because we're also working in the
Mhm.
same business, but like even I won't be specific, but then like I know we've had trips and stuff, and like
Mhm.
people are supposed to be on leave, people are not supposed to be working, but I just need to dial in for this call.
Mhm.
It's just like, oh, okay, so we're gonna stay in the hotel first for this extra hour because you have a meeting. And
And,
what can
and
we do?
sometimes it's because you have to. Sometimes because you're worried not to. Sometimes it's
Yeah,
because it's the middle of the two, like you don't really want to, but someone needs your support, so you have to
or
be there
some
to.
sense of responsibility
Yeah.
drives you.
So there's a bunch of you watching right now. So keep if you're new viewers, do know that we incorporate any comments and suggestions that you might have in the chat box. Please do comment so that we can make you part of this conversation.
Yeah, whether Facebook or YouTube, we'll pull you in.
So
So
thinking about a 4 day work week, how do you think it would be easier for a business owner to consider it? Because of course it will always sound scary. It always sounds like, oh, so I'll pay people the same for less hours.
as a
And
business owner,
and why is that smart? Diba? There's that immediate ano. And the common messages are always because people will be in a better mood or better rested and all this and that. But the counter will of course be, yeah, but people won't be resting on those days.
mm-mm.
So they'll still come into work from drinking, from going out of town, and so on and so forth. So how does one then position the mindset that a 4 day work week would be feasible?
I mean, it's hard. It's very hard, and I say this from
Hmm.
a personal standpoint. It's very hard to consider, only because what's this? I guess number one is that your clients aren't on a 4 day work week, and so I can't imagine having a day where nobody's going to answer the client.
Hmm.
And then, like, even as it stands, like when we do have those weird middle of the week holidays, um, uh, we're still on call. We're still like all on
Mm.
WhatsApp, ready to respond to a client message and stuff. And then we still have sort of skeletal staffing that like have to do stuff during that period. Same thing during like long holidays.
Yeah.
Like we're still very busy and very like we need to be able to remain responsive. And then as a medium sized company, um, it's sort of like what you were saying before. Like a lot of people have multiple hats. Then there, I don't have enough people to go around, and then like um, uh, it's always nice to hire, but I think we'll never be able to hire
Yeah.
enough that everybody can really work comfortably.
Not to mention that there's always attrition.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not a bad thing, but it is a
It's a
painful.
it's a reality.
It's a painful reality you have to face. So you might have people you've trained. They've gotten to the point that they're efficient, and you're happy enough that you can rely on them to handle things, and you can start bringing in, let's say, more work in a certain area because now you know they'll handle it, but then they leave, and
Mhm.
suddenly you're juggling again.
Yeah, so Mitch says that if there was a 4-day work week, she wants a rest day during Wednesdays.
That I was hoping to bring that up. I don't think I'll be happy with middle of the week.
I don't
rest
like
days.
middle of the week
I
rest
feel
days.
they always interrupt the momentum of a work day. And,
Yeah.
and if you have a Wednesday week break, people start slacking off Tuesday early because they think there's no work on Wednesday, and then Thursday they take so long to get started again.
Is that huh? Are we back?
So I never. So even in the office, I think a majority have already embraced that mindset. So whenever it's a holiday within
the week.
1 or 2 days of a weekend, we shunt it to the end.
Yeah.
Just
That's
so
a
that
common
so
local
that it becomes
practice.
becomes a longer thing. But lately, of course, I've been going against it because that's when we tend to have a possible holiday together.
Yeah, the weird middle of the week holidays are the ones that we tend to be able to celebrate. And then like
Diwali and all this and that.
okay, you don't get to celebrate Diwali. And then
No, but I mean, you guys would have that.
yeah.
So I basically file on that day so that I can have a holiday with you.
Yeah, even though they're like weird holiday. And then Diwali is a really bad example though, because half the time it's on Saturday.
True.
But I guess Hari Raya is a good one. Hari Raya, Puasa, Hari Raya, whatever. Because and this is locally known as El Fidir. I'm sorry, I'm massacring the pronunciation because they're almost always a midweek thing, and then I share that like I get the midweek holiday, and then whether or not Toby also has a holiday with me, I don't really get to do anything. Because well, to be fair, also it's heightened in quarantine.
Mhm.
But like so on the night before the holiday is a time I could theoretically go out.
Mhm.
But like even if Obar were open, let's say the holiday is on a Wednesday, Obar is not open on a Tuesday night, so no option there. And then Wednesday, like I'll maybe wake up late and I'll feel less productive and then not do as much within the day. But then by evening, I still have to sleep in time, like a normal time, because there's work the next day. So then it's not as fun. It's a weird
midweek is weird. I mean, it always feels ideal that it's like, oh, I can rest in the middle and then charge again.
but it's not. Doesn't really happen. I
Yeah.
feel. Ask anyone who has split offs. When I say by split offs, it's like so it's a standard 5-day work week with 2 days off, but they're not 2 consecutive days. So like I'll get maybe the Tuesday and the Saturday off, and they will never feel as rested as if you get 2 consecutive days off. So I definitely think there's power in longer weekends
Yes.
rather than just extra free time in the middle of the week. Jay has a long statement. So given Toby's statement about ability, while he thinks it's a valid concern for a creative standpoint, maybe it could be supported by ways of improving knowledge transfer to other people. In theory,
In theory, because um, there are trainable skills, there are bits of knowledge you can share, but um, being able to transfer it and for the other person to actually utilize and retain it are two very different things. We've had instances of knowledge being transferred multiple occasions, and it's still not completely absorbed. Only because there are really some things you absorb better as you do it more often. So yeah, it's still tricky sometimes. And if you expect to do that on a daily basis, oh man, it gets really painful.
um, yeah, looking at different like articles that they're trying to write about the pros and cons, it's interesting to me that one of the cons that's always cited is that not all industries can participate in a
Mhm.
4-day work week. There are industries that must be operational all the time.
Yeah.
And so then I feel like the indirect statement, which they don't quite, nobody quite spells it out. But then I feel like it's the implicit like 4-day work weeks are something that everybody has to do or nobody does it. Because as long as there are companies who are not doing it, then it kind of snowballs and affects the others.
Mhm.
That there are expectations that other companies will be available to interact with them.
On the flip side, it could be everyone is on a whatever day week they have, but it also means there's enough manpower that there's no wasted day.
Maybe.
So, for example, maybe it's Monday to Thursday for workers in Group A, but then you have the Thursday to you get what I mean. But of course, that assumes there's enough space.
Yeah, because
Because that was the problem we were looking at in our company we're in.
you're
There
creating
was-
another shift.
There was the discussions on having another shift because there was the ideas that okay, there's a large group that would prefer to work at night. I think that the problem at that time was the intense traffic along EDSA. And they were like, if we work in these
I
hours,
felt that way
Yeah,
about working at
but
night. I
remember
love
that
the lack of traffic.
there's no traffic, there's no stress. And then you had the others who were like, no, we have families. We want to be working in day because at night we're in families. So the idea was let's have a day shift, let's have a night shift. But even if we in theory could fit it in that, this is this guy ends the shift and hands off and continues. Despite us looking at that as seeing the possibilities of it working, we then already identified all these hurdles. Like the moment someone has to do overtime, all hell breaks loose because even the night shift people can't take over for that overtime.
Carlos, like we call them programmers.
They already have. They
the
already
people
have,
who want to work at night.
and the artists too.
Mm.
But
Oh, yeah, we have a lot of design people who like working in the dark.
because there is sensory deprivation does encourage creative minds.
Yeah, we've literally had like when we because we would let people choose their stations, and then you would notice the designers would be in darker and darker rooms, and then the copy people not so bad, It's
But
just,
copy people still need to read stuff, so
Yeah.
they will always have lamps. But I think Carla will attest. Even back when we were working together, the office gets really dark when you got a majority of them who are designers and programmers because we like not having to fight the lights to see our monitors.
Another interesting thing that often comes up in sort of like the challenges of implementing
For day.
a 4-day work week is the definition of vacation time, because we express vacation benefits, sick leave, vacation leave, whatever, as days. But then when you change the definition
It
of a
becomes
day,
an hour based and not a day based
yes,
definition.
and then like, do you still get the same? Do your vacation time benefits suddenly become more powerful because a workday is like in a condensed situation? A workday is longer.
I feel that is what's the word? It's a non-issue if people just accept the fact that we're really counting hours and not really the days. Because bottom line, when you go to tardiness, you suddenly look at the hours or the fractions of an hour
But
and then shaft them half a day
Yeah.
if they're breaking the rules.
But the funny thing is, was this more often than not, Philippine employees are salaried employees where
Mhm.
you're not even paid hourly,
Mhm.
but you're penalized hourly.
Yes.
So
So
it's
you'll
just-
have a full
ah.
salary, but then they count it down to the breakdown when they want to penalize you.
Yeah, you get a computed like your monthly pay is X amount, but then from there, HR and accounting teams derive your hourly rate
Yeah.
because the hourly rate is used to compute your overtime pay, your
Yes.
holiday pay, your night differential.
And in other words, we're all really hourly.
we're
but we
we're
just
secretly hourly.
But we just don't refer to it.
It's like how 13th month is not really 13th month. It is enforced savings.
Mhm.
It is part because the 13th month is not a bonus. It is part of your annual compensation. So if you really want to understand like if you're gonna annualize your compensation, it's your base salary times 13, not times 12. And then because it's your total amount, and then that's tax liable once you cross certain threshold.
Mhm.
But it's not really a bonus. So it's just funny that these little like
It's optics.
things.
It's a lot
Yeah.
of optics. Which is why there was a time I was kind of annoyed when there were companies that were like, here's your bigas. And I'm like, I didn't want to buy rice. And they're like, that's part of your benefits. Can I just get the cash instead? But that's the benefits.
Yeah, so Tom cites like
ABS-CBN had that.
the concern of imagine the pain if banks had 4-day work days and they closed by 3. So same thing. Imagine government offices
Mhm.
only working 4 days.
But again, we're looking at it as they all close on Thursday. We're not seeing it as 4 day work days for the worker.
But yeah, but what this you'll result in weird like non-optimal because let's say you have a bunch of people who work Monday to Thursday and a bunch of people who work Tuesday to
Yeah.
Friday. But then theoretically Monday probably has more expect
Mhm.
people than another. Then
But isn't that because of the weekend? But then if you have Monday to Thursday and then you have um, Wednesday to Sunday workers and
but
they have their own definition of a weekend,
but
then
was this whenever you go then you get to the scheduling question and then hence then you have people proposing it doesn't make sense for us to have fewer more people in the middle of the week when we don't need them. Then you start proposing split offs.
Mhm.
Then it gets weird. So then you might get your 3 day weekend, but it's not contiguous na naman because you still have to follow the flow of people. It has to make sense for the business.
But at the same time, we're already really making adjustments because first of all, we're not all on the same time zone. So
Mhm.
there already are little adjustments happening to compensate for that.
But
So
but that's
it's really
still
just the
that's
lesser
still
hassle.
that's still minority. It's
Mm-mm.
still the minority, and the fact that you have majority of industry's expectation for
That
services and the like.
explodes, Carl.
Yeah, would still you still expect them to be available at least during the work week during certain
Yeah.
hours. Then I think that's like the back and forth.
Because one can say the same thing about businesses that work 24 hours.
Mm-mm.
Why work 24 hours if people are only active during these hours? But then if you realize the 24-hour businesses, which did exist before there were night shifts as a common business, ano, BPO was the one that started having night shifts more often. But prior to that, the only 24 hours really catered to people who were out, um, people who were doing the weirder hours like security and the
But
like.
even if you look at that, like it still needs to follow demand.
Mhm.
So the number of 24-hour businesses were mostly limited to like convenience
Yeah.
stores and then certain in like
Certain
certain
services, yeah.
certain food places
Yeah.
were like on a limited 24-hour basis.
But with the
And
adjustment,
it wasn't until call centers all kind of boomed in that more businesses adopted to the night.
and some could even survive only in the evenings.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. That if a 4 day weekday was then normal for every person, and then that workplace is then spread out in a week, and why even call it 7 days a week? Let's just invent a new day and make it 8 days a week. So it's four and
Oh,
four.
you're totally
Let's
crazy.
change the world. They're changing everything anyway. So we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and cool days. So on those days, you now have the A shifts and the B shifts, and then now you have a whole range of businesses that follow A or B
I
shifts.
love your theoretical discussion, but you have never done a workforce management schedule. I can tell because it doesn't work out that way. And let me share a little story.
Mm.
So like, we once supported a program for customer service that had you could call in 6 days a week.
Mhm.
So it had long hours on weekdays, but on Saturdays in the US, they would have like a half a day
Mhm.
of available calls, time to call.
I mean,
And this resulted in a very weird call arrival pattern where you had a short amount of time, there's like very little volume, crazy amount of volume, very little
Mm.
volume. So it didn't make sense. Was just if you staff people to meet the highest demand, then you would have a crazy number of people on a Saturday that are mostly not productive.
mhm.
And because call centers are all about metrics, then you would have all this idle time and all this inefficiency, and it looks
Mhm.
bad on the overall scorecard. But you needed to hit those that it's like 2-3 hours
Mhm.
of peak calls, and so then the solutions they would do would be to solicit half day overtime. So they would working full shifts was not the answer
Mhm.
because having people staffed the whole time meant that you also had a lot of people doing nothing for half
Mhm.
their shift. So it's the same situation with like you can't just do an A and a B schedule
Mhm.
because since it doesn't meet the demands of the work. Because especially when we're talking about industries that are expected to be open every day, like
Mhm.
food, groceries, those kinds of services, then um, was just then you're gonna have a lot of weird inefficient schedule because and it I know it ties back to because the business wants to get the most out of it that
Mm-hmm.
any if you're reporting for a schedule then it you want them to be productive for the hours that they are assigned.
Yes.
If not, then it gets kind of crazy. And it's a bit more flexible maybe in the US where people are literally paid by the hour.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can have really weird schedules. Like you can have just a half a day and versus a so it's a lot of that. Okay, so Jay says so he agrees that maybe a 4-day work week could be applied to all industries. His hypothesis it goes against capitalist societal expectations. I mean, yeah, like if we had a super day of rest and we assume that, let's say, what if the trade off of the 4-day work week was you also have no recreational activities on weekends? Like there are no restaurants on a certain day. Like Sunday isn't France or something like that, or I forgot what country. But like, what if there was a day that nothing is open,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe that would balance things out. But then it's a tricky thing, right? Because you still was it as much as people have like off time, but you kind of expect I want to be able to do stuff during my off
Yeah,
time.
and that's part of what I mean about the A and B side because
Mm.
you're looking at different industries. You have an industry that's focused on either productivity or the corporate work, but then you also have the service industries which are dependent on when the other industry is not active
Okay,
or are active but on a break. So then you have
they were on a break.
so you have then this relationship that is right now already by itself lopsided in how it's handling things.
Mhm.
Because one, service industry is trying to adapt to whatever demand is present. But two, the non-service industry, which tends to be the customers of the service industry, is also very divided. There are the day shifters, the night shifters, you have the flexi timers, you have the freelancers who, supposedly work when they want, but in truth never stop working. So um,
So they say.
so I guess for me, I'm just seeing that if the change were applied and given a chance to settle, then you would see the adjustments happen. Because there was a point in time when the BPO industry was seen as something that won't last. Because parang who would want to work in those hours? Who
Mm-mm.
would dare to do that type of a job? But looks like it's still around. Looks like it's even grown. Diba? What people commonly thought was unthinkable, as why would anyone want to work these hours and spend these days doing fending off complaints and ganyan, ganyan. But it's work and it works for some people. So I guess that's what I'm saying, that if there were such changes made, while our initial mindset might be it won't work out, we might be surprised how people will quickly adapt and see how it works for them. And um, I'd even go as far as remember when it was unthinkable for people to survive on gigs alone. We'd only see that as what people in the entertainment industry.
Mm.
Other than that, you had to be in a company or you had to be in a ganyan, ganyan. And now, thanks to the internet, thanks to people using apps to find work, Fiverr and whatever, you now have some people who don't even have a full time job because they're just getting gigs as they come in. And it works because they can schedule things the way it will work for them. So I guess that's my piece. That there's that tendency to see the more efficient way, but the efficient way is not necessarily the human way.
Me, I just feel like I'm not saying it can't work, but I'm saying that a significant number of companies all need to do it.
Mm.
Like it's hard
It's good,
for
good.
isolated ones to do it
Yes.
because was this then was this which is like one of the articles I read. One of the downsides they cite is your competitors may not be doing it.
Yes,
And
exactly.
then as long as you have competitors who are not doing the same thing, then you're losing. Then why would the client work with you when they know that they can only talk to you 4 days a
Mm-hmm.
week? When I can get this other client, the other person, I can talk to them 5 days a
Mm-hmm.
week. So it's like it's that weird like it's like nuclear disarmament. And I will jump to a
Yeah.
weird comparison. Everybody has to do it or nobody
And it's sort of
does it.
like how there was a point in time when we were all oohing and eyeing how certain companies were like super, in our company, all the food is free and we have all
The
these
Google
amenities.
scenario.
But we don't necessarily hear if those are still active.
Yeah.
Because now they've realized they can't really afford to do that for everyone, and now they're limiting it to certain people. And it's that there are still the optics of what works. There is the eventual realization of what really works, and then there's the capitalization of how to make it work, but still hit the bottom line. Because if you don't, then you kill yourself.
Okay, so a few comments. So Jeanette's, kind of on the earlier call center discussion. Yeah, she sort of remembers like in the the late 2000s, where a lot of people would like Saturday shifts because it's super slack time for
Mhm.
80% of the day, but crazy last 2 hours, and then you have to hit all your metrics in
Mhm.
those last 2 hours. But it also says the 4-day work week could be good for folks who need to file government stuff. But what if the government officer also on a 4-day work
Mhm.
week? Which is the question. Like, because then again, it goes back to that question of expectation. So like, if we really want all industries to be 4-day work weeks, then by right, why not government also, and
Mhm.
things like that. So Tom then cites like, yeah, the weird things like in New Zealand, malls follow office hours, so you can't go to the mall after office hours, which is, but yeah, that's like, but because they're all working on an even playing field, then they can have similar like work benefits, and evening times are just time for sheep and family and more sheep. Okay.
Of course, that's a New Zealand reference based on board games,
Yes,
not on
yes.
real life.
But our one game with sheep, that many, is not even set in New Zealand. It's Norway. Okay. Jay says, if you're a business owner who calls the shots, the beauty is you can technically decide if you're going to implement a 4-day work week.
Yeah,
In
but
theory.
but again, that's the simplification, because in as much as you can decide on it, as mentioned, what if your
in an industry
competitors
where
don't?
everybody else isn't.
What if everyone else isn't? So it suddenly still becomes the burden is all on you.
And then through Jeanette, AD says, in order for this to work, there needs to be universal basic income. I think universal basic income is needed regardless of scheduling. If this were really a thing, I mean, if we really wanted to go through addressing that sort of social inequality,
Mm.
I mean, and it's always going to be controversial because it's
Now,
socialism.
now to just quickly go back to Jeanette's sharing.
Okay,
You have 8 hours. You have a hell of a 2 hours that's super super intense, and then you have 8 hours where you slack off. Do you feel it's slacking off though, or do you feel like, well, they fulfilled those 2 hours, which was practically almost 6 hours of work anyway?
in a call center, yes, because what's this? You get penalized for having too many idle agents because it means you were inefficient in your schedule, which is sometimes a metric that clients look at.
Mhm.
So the only way to compensate for that is like you end up doing a lot of training on Saturdays. So was this you expect your peak period is these 2 hours. In the hours outside of that, you have a lot of people scheduled doing nothing.
Mhm.
But if you have a lot of people idle, that's a negative metric also.
Mhm.
So instead, they'll pull them off on training ox so that they could go through these 1 hour, 2 hour trainings. It kind of helps, but it's not the
But
same.
in the human perspective, so they're always just doing more time, because it's sort of like if that 2 intense hours was equivalent of 6 hours of work.
But it's not equivalent to 6 hours of work. Because every hour, in the call center, it's not even every hour. Every 30 minutes is important.
Yeah, but is it a weight based on time alone, or is it waste based on effort?
Time.
Yeah.
Because
See, but that's my point. See, so
because
it's not a human.
yeah,
It's not a
because
human
call
facing.
centers break it down to 30-minute chunks called intervals,
Mm-mm.
and you are scored per interval. So
Mm-mm.
if you fail consecutive intervals, then it's bad. So if you were doing okay but you still screwed up like 4 intervals, then it's still a bad
And
day.
in that token, it also means that in an interval, you cannot overdo work. No matter how much work you do in that interval, that's a successful interval only, and not a
It's success or
overly
fail.
successful.
Yeah.
So yun nga. So it's more focused on the time and not really on the effort.
Okay. Sure, and I'm
I
like
mean,
super close to this
me, I'm
because
understanding the I'm understanding the metrics.
I was very good friends with our workforce people.
Mm.
Okay, and I used to handle training in call centers. So as much as I wanted my life to be Monday to Friday,
Mm-mm.
then be like, hey, we have Saturday shifts. They need training,
Mm.
and like there is no training to give. They need training because we can't have them on the
Yeah.
phones. It's like, oh, great. So now we have to think of refresher training, and it was a lot of bullshit. It was a lot of like sitting around in the training room for an
Mm.
hour trying to kill time. Ooh, Carlos, like suggestions on books to read for productivity in the workplace. There are many, all have value. It depends on what you are looking for. Like
And what you define as productivity.
yeah, like the earlier book I was referencing about the value of 30-minute meetings. I remember now it's something called Read This Before Our Next Meeting. It is not the best book in the world. It's
Mhm.
actually very, very short. If there are books that I felt were super interesting from thinking about like how a company can work, I will always cite Work Rules by Laszlo Bock. This is something that I got the audiobook for. My sister got me the physical book one. It was about a guy who did like HR for Google. So he talks about Google as an organization from that perspective and sort of the HR side of it. And that was a very fascinating read and how they look at performance reviews, how they think about
Mhm.
their maintaining company culture. So that I like. But in terms of like personal productivity, I don't know. I mean, like I don't know. You can fall back to things like GTD, getting things done, but that's like a personal productivity structure thing.
Mhm. And a
Um,
lot of it defaults back to making a checklist,
Making lists, scheduling your time,
taking
whatever.
breaks.
Yeah. So I mean, I have this joke with my mom because she's an HR professional, and then like she regularly buys new business
Mhm.
books that seem to cover the same thing, and then I always joke like, are we just buying these books to get the latest buzzwords for describing what used to
Mm.
be something else?
Speaking of buzzwords,
Okay. Buzz, buzz, buzz.
I've gotten to the point in my life where I really struggle to just bite my tongue and not comment aloud. Oh, you're using buzzwords
Okay.
because you can notice it when you're used to it. When a conversation has repeated a number of times about the same topic, just to be able to use a certain buzzword.
Ooh. Oh, I used to have a funny boss like that in my call center years. I know when he was interviewing other people because he'd come back to me with like weird questions and phrases and like
Hmm.
you've never cared about this before. Suddenly you're asking about COPC certification. And like who did you talk to? It's like where did you pick up these terms? So I could figure out like sort of the type of person he was talking to based on like the things he would
Hmm.
tell me after.
So Carlo, Jay has
Jay suggests
suggested.
for Carlos
Yeah,
single tasking, the 7 habits of highly effective
isn't it
people.
more than seven? I remember it's until nine. Na eh.
They're just many books.
Yeah, but I remember he's expanded the books to have suddenly the eighth habit, and then later on
Yeah,
there was the
yeah.
ninth habit.
I'm okay with it. I mean, like, I will always argue that any book is like
Yeah,
any book has value.
and I will admit the seven habits weren't bad. It was a good read. It's something that I feel more people should read.
Oh God! But there was this one series of books that I didn't quite like. Wait, now I can't remember. I'm gonna check my Audible list. There was one guy I was super disappointed. Um, oh no, I can't remember. Oh, let's look at all my finished books. Okay. There were some workbooks that, business books that I like. Okay, I was kind of turned off by some of it.
Hmm.
Give me a moment. Toby, say something.
No, I'm trying to remember this book. I think it was this one, but I'm worried because the name sounds like a sci-fi movie. The Third Wave.
What is that?
I think I remember reading this as a bathroom reading because it was in the bathroom back in my parents' place.
Okay, I love the
But
bathroom
it was
books
sort
like
of like
that.
a roadmap of the future and what were expected innovations and the like to happen, and to be prepared even if they weren't around yet. Um, yeah, I think it was this one. Steve Case. A lot of about venture capitalism and this and that. So I think I remember reading that. It's not necessarily about being efficient and stuff, but it kind of like gives you a perspective on how you should view opportunity and possibilities. Just don't make the mistake of also thinking about it when you end up watching a certain movie that has a similar name and thinking they're related.
Oh, okay, I remember now. I don't have a recommendation. I have an author I now want to avoid,
Okay.
which is John Maxwell. So a
Okay.
lot of people love John Maxwell, and he's a
Okay.
very popular. a business book writer. But then I didn't realize he's super religious.
Okay.
So he has a lot of like, and that personally is a turn off for me. Like, I don't think my business strategy boils down to also incorporating faith and prayer. So, I
Okay.
mean, and that could work for you. It just doesn't work for
Mhm.
me. Um, and then when I realized that his business books read that way, like, oh, crap, why did I get this?
I wouldn't be necessarily against it, only because I still also believe people can reinterpret that in what works for them. For example, um, there is the book The Artist's Way, which I still um, will swear people should read if you want to be a creative individual. And that also does go to full spiritualist, raise it to the higher power mindset in the later pages. But me being not the really religious person, I sort of saw it as connecting with the creative forces. I had a friend who was super religious and was sobrang, oh, God is so good, I'm artistic, and ganyan, ganyan. And I'm like, you're very creative. And I'll leave it at that. But then I also had another friend who was super atheist and all that, and saw it instead as, the creative forces he was connecting with was just the collective unconscious of the world and ganyan, ganyan. So I think you can just angle your perspective in that way.
Yeah, yeah. AD agrees with me that Maxwell, because he's literally a pastor.
Yeah.
That's like the stimulant. Yeah, and sorry, yeah, I know it's not productivity, but it's just like it's just business books. I end up trying to. It's one of those because everybody's reading it, and
Oh,
I
there you
figure I should
go.
listen to it.
Thank you, Adrian. The Toffler book, not the case book. There.
Okay,
That's why the case one
Third
looked weird.
Wave by Alvin Toffler.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was my
Yeah.
bathroom reading, and it was so wrong.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like of the different books I've gone over, I think the one that really stands out for me is Work Rules. But I don't know if it's not necessarily productivity.
Mhm.
But it's thinking about business systems and being more systematic, even in how you run your HR. And I
Mhm.
think that's like that's inspired like how I because currently I handle operations ultimately, and how I handle companies in that manner
Mhm.
and thinking about performance management frameworks and all these things. And that was super helpful to me. And then, I mean, like I don't know what else to cite. I don't read a lot of productivity specific stuff
Mhm.
because I feel I am already productive. I mean, like I certainly procrastinate from time to time, but I ultimately I get things done, and I don't know. I feel like I have my mom to thank for that, and if that's we keep telling her that she should like get around to writing a book
Mhm.
or some sort of book series, and we'll support it. But it's probably not going to be very popular and touchy feely. It's very like just do it, do it. It's your job, just do it.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, yeah, so I don't know what else to cite about this. I mean, it's an interesting concept working 4 days a week. But then, but I feel like on the one hand, a true 4 day work week means not condensing hours, but
Mhm.
reducing hours
Yeah,
overall. And that's hard to do
that's hard to
until
sell.
a lot of industries do it, or like if the government mandates it and reduces the total working hours,
Mhm.
then that would work out.
And I feel even the workers won't like it
Yeah,
because that
because
means that's less pay.
it's less pay. If you especially because there are still a lot of people who are
Mhm.
paid by the hour, especially in like service industries, construction,
And
fields like
even
this.
if it's not less pay in the sense of, let's say it's you're starting in the job and you already know for the start it's a 4 day work week, then you're going to be paid properly because you're not being paid less from an originally 5 day work day.
Mhm.
But then if you find out there's a job offer somewhere else and for one extra day you earn this much more, most likely you'll still go for it given how costs and are the money is right now in terms of our industries.
Yeah.
It's not as if we're all already paid big enough that losing 1 day of pay, meaning not necessarily you lost it, but meaning you're ignoring the opportunities to earn more from companies offering full 5 days of work, is something you can easily ignore. Because if that extra day of work is suddenly literally a fifth more of what you're earning now, then why not? Most
Mm.
people will still jump for that.
Yeah, Tristan shares like this. No matter what innovation in work arrangements you introduce, it won't stand a chance as long as we're still locked into the expectations and mindset of a 5-day work week. Outcome should be focused on
That's
welfare
true.
of the individual worker as much as the bottom line.
But the welfare of the individual worker, unfortunately, is one of the least important things as many capitalists will focus on.
Yeah,
Because as far as they're concerned, we paid you. I
that's
don't owe you anything
the
anymore.
contract is
Yes.
fulfilled. Yeah.
And sadly, that's the reality to it. Um, which is why I even sometimes worry about, um, will we ever reach a point in time wherein one, there's universal healthcare. So, our taxes are also helping cover our medical problems. Two, our then pay is based on our work effort. Because I always feel like that's something which I wish was more prominent. Then that would make a lot of the workers who are working in more menial tasks feel more valued. So people in the service industry won't be looked down upon. They'll be seen as doing a lot more work because there's a lot more effort there. But likewise, people doing effort. But then it's always subjective, so it's hard.
Yeah, I always wonder, like, and then there's a bit of a jump. Like, when you think about the supposed alternate philosophy of, like, utopian society, when you think about Star Trek, the Star Trek future, where you have a federation with a weird economy that people just do jobs but
Mhm.
don't get paid. They're the federation itself does not have
So
money.
basically, the idea being
It's all for the collective good.
and you're cared for anyway, so you
Yes.
don't need to be paid.
Yes. Because with the advent of things like replicators, then your basic needs are always met. Then it's just a question of like doing fulfilling things however you want them to do. And then even things like books, literature, you're not dealing with copyright. They're
Mhm.
because all the information of the entire federation is generally available to you at the touch of a button.
Mhm.
But kind of going back to the whole mindset point, but like you have people who are against. So, for example, I embrace DRM for things like Kindles because I feel like if you support it long enough, maybe we'll get to Star Trek and like the shared library of all knowledge. But we have people who don't like not literally owning things
Mm-mm.
and don't feel comfortable with just paying for access and
Mhm.
instead want copies,
And
which is justifiable.
in as much as we might want to say, we're not living in that ideal society because we are all victims of capitalism and all this and that. We also have to accept the fact that people, a majority of people by human nature, will not choose to be productive. And this is proven by the fact that we all have access to the internet, but how much spend most of our time learning something new?
Mm,
Most
right?
of us
Or
will
just
choose,
mucking around.
yeah, most of us will choose to entertain ourselves, to do what we want. And it's not bad. But then if you do consider now, if we were in a utopian society wherein you're not expected to be paid because you're cared for and you'll just have to do what you're supposed to be good at, why wouldn't you just muck around?
Ooh, Adrian, speaking through Jeanette, says, in his opinion, the Federation is a gift economy
Mhm.
while we live in a debt economy, which is
That's an interesting,
that's an interesting way to put it.
view it.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, and not to say that the Star Trek Federation is perfect. I mean, in was this they're like the benevolent Borg because they offer you like we offer you everything we have, but you gotta join us and offer and give us everything and
Mhm.
subsume like your military into our military and all
And
these
they
things.
never really explained how it works, right?
Yeah, they
It,
didn't
it
have
was always
to.
hand waved.
Basta it works.
That's how it works.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the joy of fiction.
For all we know, it was built on the bodies of millions of people who were wiped away so they don't complain.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's basically how history does tend to be like. This capitalist society we live in, you could color the perspective in such a way we're in. Oh, in back in the industrial way of handling things, it was like this. So now we made it better. So yeah, now, that comparison was made in Deep Space Nine.
So it's a
Is that a
challenge.
bot? Because it's like super out
Yeah.
of nowhere.
As long as I see their last name is Bacarisas, they're all bots.
So there's a family.
It's a family of bots.
How interesting.
And then they try to comment relevant stuff, but then like this one's like super bork. But then like they're the ones also some we talk about like games. They'll mention names of games.
I'm now wondering if upcoming Christmas 2021 is like related to a 4-day week work week as a title of something, and it's another.
Or they're talking about 3-day weekends and
Or,
like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. So
Well,
who knows?
At
bot?
least we
What do you
know
think?
the artificial intelligence overlords have noticed us and are sending minions to check on us every now and then. I wonder if they work 4-day weekends.
No bots are 24 hours a day. They're
Well,
always running.
That's what we think.
No, I'm pretty sure they don't have to work. It's an algorithm just let out.
Yeah, but maybe they can split themselves and the consciousness is mucking around.
Because again, then you're arguing that they're actually sentient and like are citizens who have to pay taxes.
But what's the definition of sentient?
That they can think for themselves and
So-
not necessarily just following a
Who's to say they
code
aren't?
sequence. There's we'll just make them do the test in Blade Runner, just like are you
Because we're only seeing what they're letting us see.
Turing test.
Turing, we need you. Okay, so back to 4-day weeks. So we talked about compressed weeks. We talked about actual 4 days only working. We talked about the weekend, the rest day being in the middle of the week.
Hmm.
Are there any other 4-day work weeks we haven't considered?
I don't know. I mean, like it's just tricky,
Mhm.
I guess, and I mean, like it could happen, but man, it could super change so many things. It's like the BPO industry when it started to boom here, regulations started to change to support the industry, and they have their own sort of lobby in the
Mhm.
political machine. And then when COVID happened and people started working from home, and then internet quality got really bad for some people, then you had a lot of call centers like kind of move out and
Mhm.
go back because the service quality was no longer what they expected. And then so just like that, all the changes made for this industry kind of become less useful and less meaningful, and it was a struggle throughout
Mhm.
2020.
Now
yeah.
we are at a turning point given the pandemic.
Yep.
Just as things changed, as computers became more accessible in homes and suddenly new industries sprouted out, just as even further back, knowledge became something that was easier transferred because printing presses started to appear.
Okay.
With the entire world having now experienced that working from home is not necessarily impossible, then even after the pandemic, you could imagine a lot of companies will be now faced with a workforce that might not want to work at all outside of their homes. And as much as we hate working from home, um, as this pandemic continues, many will start making adjustments to the point that they're comfortable. Because a lot of the discomfort was, I still have the bad connection. I hate being able to work at home because everything's happening at home. But given enough time, things normalize. People
Maybe.
get used to it. So then we might see the advent of when work comes open again in offices, companies might be forced to come up with new incentives or might be forced to consider certain things. Other companies might go the opposite way. We're in, oh, since we're hiring a new workforce, we can now cut down on what we're offering because you gotten used anyway to surviving on this amount. So you know what I mean. The capitalist side of it might try to take advantage in both ways. One way would be to throw more incentive to try to get you back. The other way would be, we know you need the money, so we can offer you lower. Most of us in this industry will offer that low anyway. So given all that, what do you see as possible changes because of the pandemic?
It's hard to say. I mean, like, and I speak from a company that had work from home benefits
Yeah.
before the pandemic,
Even before.
and and then after a year, almost a year, solid year in lockdown, especially in a creative
Mhm.
company, then you definitely have creatives who are sorely missing. As much as they're mostly introverts, but then you creatives kind of miss being with each other.
Yes,
and
I think that human aspect is
and
still
being able to just bounce ideas off, and I mean that aspect is lost.
Mhm.
I think personally, and this is not really a 4-day work week question, but like I think personally that companies won't be able to entirely walk away from work from home.
Mm-hmm.
But especially for countries like the Philippines, working from home is still not the ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of people, as much as their work situation at home has gotten more comfortable, for others it's still hell.
Yeah.
It's still like, I mean, like I've had meetings where um, the person was literally trying to find a spot in the house to have the call
Yes.
because other family members were having calls at the same time. We are,
we have that.
we struggled, just
Yeah.
the two of us, figuring out how to handle simultaneous
Yeah.
meetings.
I have an office mate who is struggling because it's been an entire week that there's construction beside their house. So every meeting is like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and it's not his house; it's the
Yes,
neighbor.
Exactly.
So so our more often than not, I feel our home environments are still not the best.
What I'm thinking of though is some companies might offer a staggered working at the workplace type of approach.
Which I think it has to be.
Something like maybe 4 days in the office and 1 day you work at home.
Yeah,
Because there would be that instance of it'll give you time to adjust. Maybe the offices they won't want to spend too much first on the bigger office space, and they're looking at a smaller workforce.
and then there's what we can't get away from the reality is from a pandemic, the board game perspective. We are not going to eradicate COVID.
Yes.
So COVID and its
Will
related
still be
mutations will still be around, and so it's still not going to be safe to fully staff offices.
Yeah, and
even if we're fully vaccinated.
well, as much as herd immunity eventually will be achieved, just like how certain diseases were still around, like chickenpox and the like, there will still be those moments wherein, oh, look, it's back.
And COVID is still like closer in terms of infection rate to like the common cold, and we never got rid of the common cold.
Mhm.
It's just that it's still largely benign enough that we don't have to declare quarantine for the common cold.
Mhm.
But technically, that's a pandemic that has never ended. So I don't think COVID is going to end. It's going to diminish, and we're going to be better equipped to face it. But then I think we're gonna largely rethink office capacity and these things like that. So yeah. Jay shares, it's challenging for us who are middle class people in the metro. Imagine other places where connectivity and hardware are also difficult to acquire. Yes.
Yeah, and I'm really hoping that those difficulties are then going to push the what's the word, the people who have the resources to take advantage of that situation in the sense of bringing services to those areas.
Mm.
Because yes, they are capitalizing on it, but they will also earn from it. And in the end, that still means more people having more access. Because that's a large part of what has made the Metro Manila situation so frustrating. That progression has always been kept within Metro Manila and not really allowed to expand further. Despite the multiple attempts, the airport in Clark, attempts to develop certain cities beyond Metro Manila, but then it never really progresses outwards because everything's still focused here.
Yeah, and you see call centers that tried this.
Yeah.
That they tried to set up shop outside of Manila
It
to
will
get
start
talent.
to grow and then it stops
Because
it's not further
the
supported.
talent pool is still weaker. Like the supporting colleges still do not produce graduates as good as Manila and all these things.
And there is that interconnected thing that since the development is not moving up in a, I guess you could say, local scale, the government is not like building more stuff there as well.
Yeah.
Then it's just the private companies and people investing, and that will only last for so long.
Jeanette shares she personally enjoys working from home, but does understand the benefit of working in an office. Aside from the socializing, there are also the idea of resources being the cargo of the company: electricity, water, Wi-Fi, and you don't have to
Yes.
pay for yourself.
That's the
Yeah, we have, especially when the shift from work from home, you have a lot of like
the water bills jumped because we're suddenly realizing how much of the bathroom we use. Now that
yeah,
we're always
and you're
home.
there was no change, and on average there was like little to no change to compensation for most people in this period
But
because
expense has increased.
yeah, because personal expenses, well, it's hard to say if it increased or just shifted because instead of commuting and eating out, you're now paying for your own electricity. But it really depends on how you look
For
at it.
me, I think it increased only because, in as much as there's commuting and eating out, those were still variable enough that you tailor it.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
then electricity and the like, you can't really choose. You can't like go, okay, I won't use my computer today.
Yeah. Again, Tom says, yeah, might not apply to all, but for those that it does affect it, it's a pain. Sister's usually here working along with her daughter, school from home. So electricity bill skyrocketed. Yeah, same here. Like, I mean, apart from working from home, then it's things like, do I really want to work and it's not aircon?
And then there's the long term fear of, what will be the upcoming workers. With people not being able to go to school, with the reliance on homeschooling or alternative means, it's safe to say that there are probably a lot of students also who are slacking off. And
Or to be fair, even if they're not slacking off, but then they're just not getting the same level of
Yeah.
education as they would
Yeah.
in person. I
And-
mean, let's be fair to them
Yes.
too. Yeah.
I was getting to that.
Yeah. Okay.
But I guess what I'm saying is we are looking at a future wherein the landscape of able workers will be very different. And that will have its own chain of reactions in the years to come.
I mean, like, we were already worried about the implementation of K 12 because that was suddenly adding an extra year to the education system, which understand why. But tuloy, it also, like, it delayed the whole generation
Yeah.
from graduating. And
Yeah.
then from a hiring perspective, a lot of companies were like dreading what to do dealing with,
with that gap.
that sort of gap year.
Mhm.
And then actually that gap year practically coincided with COVID.
Mhm.
And then in the past, in the past year, I've actually been, in a position to interview people, and more I'm meeting more of these, dare I say, COVID graduates, or people who've had to finish their last year in COVID
Mm.
quarantine. And you hear the frustration that they've been through, um that their last the last term was not great,
Mhm.
that the 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 quality of schooling definitely
then-
hit. And then things like thesis work and stuff,
Or
it was all
many
online.
of them will not have internships because
Yes.
they really weren't able to intern somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know, like, who's offering online internships, right? And it's just tricky. So yeah, so I mean, like, we're definitely in a weird, the global pandemic is gonna have far reaching effects, and then whether it makes people more open to experiment with things like
Mm.
4-day work weeks.
Consider change.
I mean, I don't know if we're going to implement an actual 4-day work week, but I think, since you brought it up, it's actually an interesting point. I think we're going to see a sort of a split. We're going to see more work from home.
Yeah, or at least we're seeing hybrids where
Yeah.
we might see people na parang, okay, you'll have a 2-day work week with us, but then 3 days you work from home, or is something like that. Because
Because I think we're going to have to limit parang capacity at
Yes.
offices, or offices working in line with that will also have smaller spaces.
yes, and then other offices naman will also still want to limit, like they might only have their current workers back, and then new hires maybe work from home muna because it's less. It's just less cost for me if you don't work out.
That's true.
And that's a very capitalist but possible way that they'll do it.
Mhm.
Diba?
So Jeanette's like, for speaking for Adrian, fought for the 8-hour day. Now we need to fight for the power to define our jobs. No, maybe. Jason, what do you think could be a potential benefit of a 4-day work week for work from home? It depends. Is it still quarantine? Because I feel like increasing everyone's off time has little to no impact until we're out of quarantine.
Yeah. I will admit though that I feel a work from home situation should never be the norm.
Mm.
Um,
Mingling your home space and your workspace is a struggle.
I feel that division should always be present to keep a healthier mindset in your life. I feel that being to physically meet with your coworkers
Mm.
is very important, even if your job is not necessarily working together. To have that sense of community in the workplace is very important in actually handling work stress.
Yeah, and just trying to define, like, what your company culture is.
Mhm.
Company culture is hard to maintain working from home.
And, we can say, but we built relationships online with our friends online. That's different because if that reaches a point you're not happy, you can drop them. But coworkers, you can't just like choose not to work with them.
They're still your coworkers.
So
And even in the online friend comparison, yeah, we say we have a lot of friends online, but it will always feel different
when
once
you finally meet,
once you get to meet them and hang out
Mhm.
with them in person versus people you've only ever seen on Twitter.
hello
you know,
Rehan.
I definitely, and I will concede, maybe this is just me, but really the average person you're connected to on social media, you're not super close versus people you've met in person and you added on social after.
And while you can be quite close to people you've met online, it always jumps further in how close you are once you meet online. Once you meet face to
And
face.
hello, Rehan.
Because there is a certain the point of the online meeting is you feel like you have that barrier. You feel like you have that, oh, I can react a few minutes later, but I can compose my thoughts.
I'll always sound smart because I can Google what you asked that I
I'm
don't
so
know about.
angry and I can react immediately, or I can choose not to, but the other person has no idea that that's happening. So there is that filter that can affect the intimacy. In a face to face, the filter is much harder to maintain, which means you're much more exposed to each other, which means you get to know each other a bit more. Um, so continuing, potential benefits though, I feel, um, Mia, long term, if I ideally were offered, para say work from home ka na, then my response would be, then I need a pay increase. Because that should cover my expenses. And I don't see that happening from any company who will be like, okay, we won't let them come in, but we'll pay them more because we're paying for the electricity. But that I feel is the only way I would be comfortable with a permanent situation of not meeting my coworkers.
Yeah. I like for us we rejigged. We used to have a transportation allowance, and then I turned it into a telecommuting allowance,
Mhm.
which is not quite. I mean, like I feel like in either case, it was a limited benefit that probably did not fully pay for the transportation.
But at least help.
It at least help. I also don't think it fully pays for all the impact to their home life, but I hope it helps. But um, I can only go so far, and then there's always going to be that expectation of, well, this is the offer, and then how you deal with it and how it breaks down to your expenses.
Mhm.
As long as it is equitable, then it's up to you and the company to decide to accept it and sign off and blah blah blah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like for so I don't mind working from home, but I do feel uh, as someone running a business, one I'm always worried about morale and culture because I literally don't know how people are.
Yes.
Like no matter how many online calls you have, especially here, like you have so many online calls that everybody's cameras are off.
And then no matter how often you ask and they answer, that's still a filtered response.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Parang, how are you doing? Okay lang, sir. But that okay lang, sir could be, ay nako, yan na naman yung boss ko.
yeah. So it's the soft things that I have a difficulty with. Productivity, I guess, is fine for the most part, and it's easy to correct. But like morale, are people happy? Or these are the things I cannot address as well in a remote situation. And I've seen companies that had like split like remote staff versus on-site staff,
Mhm.
and then the on-site staff will always feel more part of the company than the remote staff.
Yeah.
And then the remote
I
staff
felt
are
that.
most likely to leave.
I felt that when I was working with um, a majority of the team was night shift.
Mm,
So I was always meeting them because I wasn't night shift, but I'd always meet them in those few
in
hours.
the middle, the crossover.
And
Yeah.
I always felt I was out of the conversation, even if they were giving me updates and all that. So there were times they'd come in early pa for lunch and then be like, oh, sige, I'll join you guys for lunch. Kasi it's... But then while having lunch, I could feel I'm not really connecting with them. And wala, that really gets lost when you're not there.
So all the more now that we're super work from home,
Mhm.
and then people are like not turning on cameras, and I mean sometimes it's internet challenge, sometimes it's just a home challenge and all that. I mean like no amount of virtual backgrounds will hide the chaos behind you.
and
You know?
and there is the actual energy transference, which it sounds psychic, whatever.
No, but I totally agree.
But that human connection, this Baduy Pride has lasted this long because Rocky and I are in the show together. If it was a one man show, I don't think it would have
You could
lasted
feel
this
very
long
sad.
because you really don't get anything back.
Yeah.
And even in our online RPG sessions with friends, we end up looking at each other while we're playing turns, even if it's not with each other, because that still helps give the feel of a feedback loop.
Yeah, yeah.
And in a working from home long term experience, then you're like an astronaut talking to Houston with better time delays being managed.
And maybe it depends on like your role in your company. But I guess if you are an individual contributor who rarely coordinates with other people, you just have to
Mhm.
submit your stuff in. Maybe it'll work out. But if you're working in a team,
Mhm.
this work from home thing is hard to
Yeah,
maintain.
it's hell.
It's not super viable.
It's hell. So I think that covers a lot more than we expected for our 4-day work week.
Yeah, thanks to Mitch for suggesting this topic. And I don't know
Before
if
we
we went
end,
there.
before we
But
end,
okay.
what about a 7-day work week? But
Okay.
you only work that many hours a day.
So it's like your 40 hours divided by 7 now instead of.
Yes.
I think that'll be worse.
You think so?
Because, and I go back to my night
The night
shift
shift, there's
analogy.
no rest day.
There's no rest day. And it's just and then there's like, because, was this, activities are going to be, I mean, as much as activity can be scheduled around it, but then like it's just weird. It's just super weird. Because then you're always working. Because I think the brain, the body needs time
Need
away
to
from
break from
work
the routine
to
every now
just
and then.
not get into it, you know.
Mm.
And we get that with like, hence hump day is a thing
Mm-mm.
that people look forward to, the turnaround where the weekend is closer than
Mm.
the rest of the week was.
And I guess if it was a 7-day work week, then it's like you're doing your thesis.
Oh, Tom has a good point about, and it's more expenses for commuting and eating out. I mean, like if it were like regular work, then
7-day.
the it adds expenses. So
That's
that's true. Mitch requires her 1 day sleep all day, rest day. Um, Jeanette, what about maternal and paternal leaves also for LGBT couples or families? But that's another subject. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's like a very different question.
Because maternal and paternal leaves are tied to the family code. So until the family code gets revised,
Yeah,
no.
and like we mentioned way earlier in the episode, the challenge of the 4-day work week is how it impacts the definition of a leave. So we count leaves in days, but really we be counting them in 8-hour productive blocks. But then it's not that you can file a 2-hour leave. You know, you file a whole day or a half day, uh, depending on company policy. So it's a whole can of worms when you're trying to make vacation days work in a 4-day work week. If you're working condensed hours, so you have longer days. Uh, yeah, it's a bit of a mess. Oh, and the other thing I think I also don't like about condensed hours, which I don't know if people think about, is overtime is harder to get to.
I was about to say there would be no overtime in theory.
It could still
Yeah.
happen, but then like because now the overtime only starts after the 11th hour.
Yeah, and that's expensive. Companies won't want to do that.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
more for them to pay.
and it's bound to happen. But at the same time, I think that if I remember labor code right, is like you also can't work more than 12. I mean, like, parang it's gonna stop at a certain
Mhm.
point. Except doctors for some reason, because we like to torture our medical
Yeah.
staff. I don't understand
I've heard
24-hour shifts.
Yeah, I've heard 24-hour shifts.
I do not understand 24-hour shifts in the medical field. That's another episode.
All right, I think we've covered a lot. We've gone over an hour and a half talking about this.
Wow.
Um, thank you, Jeanette, with your last statement, which is a lot of our labor laws are based on factory assumptions. Yeah. So, I guess to end with the pandemic, we will see how the world changes. And some of us might actually be able to be part of that change bigger, decision makers, people who might be in influential positions, people who rally for certain changes. So it's an interesting time to see how this will all transform.
Yeah, I mean, like it's something that like we're all going to think about a lot, and even whether you're an employer or an employee, I think it's really making us re-examine our relationship with work
Mm-mm.
and like what are really most important to you. Maybe some people are thriving in work from home and will never want to leave. Others now have a new appreciation for working in an office and can't wait to get back.
Yes,
So
that's
it's
true.
so
That's true.
it'll be the safe statement is it'll be interesting to see what happens when things start actually
I
going
wonder
back
if
to
it'll
normal.
create a new job class.
Why
So,
is it a class?
You have contractuals, you have employees, you have, but maybe there'll be this new one now. We're in parang you'll work with us, but you're expected to bring your own equipment or something kasi nabili mo na. Yung parang mga ganong, wala lang. It's
Aren't
just
they freelancers?
something like that. Na parang, since you will hire you in this level, we'll pay you this amount because we're expecting you to already have this. And yeah, something like that. Because sometimes they do that.
Yeah,
There's
I mean,
little adjustments.
there are
to base on.
long term work from home companies even before the pandemic,
Mhm.
and then like it becomes a requirement to have a certain internet connection and certain equipment already on hand.
And
then if
supposedly
they can't, they
that's-
won't provide.
And supposedly that's expected in terms of why you're paid this much because you're supposed to supply that already.
Yeah, I mean,
So stuff like
and
that.
I've encountered like when in just the interviews for our positions, I still get surprised that I have people asking me, "Do I have to use my own computer?"
Mhm.
And like, I don't know, because it's a typical full time job. Shouldn't I be handling equipment? But I get it. There are a lot of companies that sneak that in. That no, you have to do with your own
And
computer.
then there are others like me who refuse to use company issued computers because I just don't like it when I don't. It's not my thing I'm working on.
Well, technically, I'm working on a company computer, but it helps that I also run the company.
Yeah. But remember, even before, when they were like, well, we can lend you this computer. I'm like, no, I want to use mine because I have my way. I fix my files and all this and that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when I do online banking, I don't want to be on someone else's computer and the browser we might have. You know.
Yeah, and then like it's like whenever I do contract explanations, and then I discuss the intellectual property clauses in our contract, and then like I always like as a piece of advice, because of course we have a lot of creatives. Like if you're going to work on a passion project or any personal thing, your next great novel, art, whatever, so that the company has no claims on it, I really recommend do not use my equipment
Yes.
for your personal projects.
Yes.
Because if you use your work computer,
By it's under.
it's a work. It
Yes.
could be construed as a work product while you are under contract with me, and then I don't want to, but I could.
And the fact is, creatives will always find that creative moment when they want to work on a personal project.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is our topic on 4-day work weeks, and we have spent an hour and a half talking about it to a bunch of you out there. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a lot of fun, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
Yeah, we had like 7 viewers, but I feel like we didn't have as many commenters. So for the silent people, I hope you get to speak next time. If not, hey, for questions or suggestions for future episodes, fill up the Google form at bit.ly Baduy Pride Ideas. Thanks again to Mitch for suggesting this topic. And then again, I didn't realize how timely it was because the Kickstarter news is new that they're doing 4-day work weeks next week. We still have an episode tomorrow night where we're gonna talk about personality tests and all their quirks and intricacies and
The modern day version of the Zodiac.
oof. And there's some people who are super into zodiac still, so I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Or crystals or other healing things.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah. We'll talk about that tomorrow, and we hope you'll join us for that.
You can also follow us on Twitter, all Toby No Shade, RG Sunico.
You can also check out our blog, baduypride.com, for all the previous episodes and stuff about us.
Feel free to continue the conversation in the comments below and let us know what you think about how the 4-day work week could work for you. Are you not against condensed hours? Are condensed hours crazy? We'd love to hear from you. And be sure to subscribe for notifications, whether on Facebook or YouTube, so you don't miss our next live stream. Once again, I'm Rocky.
And I'm Toby.
And this is Baduy Pride.